All right. In this video, I want to talk about conjecture, speculation, and what is just straight up imagination. Because Paul tells us that we're to bring down all these imaginations into the obedience of the mind of Christ. And some people have been leaving comments that have gotten me to think, and it's thoughts that I've had, but I'd never really put anything to it, right? For an example, they'll talk about how Lot, using, what do they call it, gematria, name comes to 45, right? And if you do the same thing with something like Enoch, equals 45. They'll say, oh, look at that, like two depictions of the rapture, right? And then they'll say, well, if we multiply this together, it equals 2025. So that means that's when the rapture is. I was like, okay, how did you get that? Just because their names equal that numbers, why did you think that if you multiply them, it brings you to the year of the rapture? Like, what in scriptures led you to this? What I would say is, let's slow down there, buddy. All right, maybe you're onto something that I just don't see, right? I can admit that maybe I'm clueless, right? But this doesn't prove anything. Why do you multiply? Why don't you divide it so then it equals 1? Or why don't you add it together so that it equals 90? Or why don't you subtract it so that it equals 0? Why don't you do that? Or why don't you just leave it as 45? Or why don't you add it together, the 4 and the 5, so that you just get 9? Right? What you actually need to do is show this as in, let's say you went into the scriptures and you looked at the name of, let's say, Moses, and let's say Aaron, his brother, and their names equaled, a number. I'm not going to put a number down, but let's say when you multiplied it, it equaled 32 AD, right? It equaled 32, and this pointed to the year Jesus was crucified. And you'd be like, okay, that's interesting. And then when you take something like Daniel and multiply the number of his name with, let's say, John, because they both had these prophetic books there, and you multiply their number together, it equals, I don't know, let's think of anything. Let's say it equaled 70, and you're like, 70 AD, the destruction of the temple, kind of like something they're prophesying, right? Abomination of desolation kind of thing. And then it'd be like, okay, now you're on to something, right? If you keep multiplying these people's names that are connected together, and you get dates that line up with something that they were talking about, something that they pictured, then you got something. But why just randomly say this person's name equals this number, and let's multiply it with this other person's name who equals the same number, and wow, 2025, that is so cool. And that's cool because we're in that year, but really? Another thing that I think ties into this is jubilees. All right? This is something that's fine to look at. And one thing I'm going to say before I continue is that conjecture, speculation, and imagination is fine when you admit that's what it is, right? Like if we're going to sit here and use conjecture and say we're going to speculate to imagine when we believe the rapture is, and it looks like it's the year 2025, and it looks like it's at the Feast of New Wine, and you talk about that, that's fine if you admit that's what this is, right? If you admit that's what it is, fine. But if you're saying like this is hardcore evidence, this is what's going on, there's no reason to do that with this, especially with something like they bring up the Jubilee count. One who does this a lot is Rock Island Books. He has very interesting stuff. I recommend checking him out and everything. But a lot of these people think things are surrounded around the Jubilees and these cycles, even though there's nothing that's actually specifically said that that's true, right? I mean, it was something for Israel to do, and it had to do with like harvesting and letting the land rest. So, yeah, it's something to look at, but again, it turns into conjecture and speculation and imagination because it's not something that we can use to really prove anything, right? Was Jesus crucified on a Jubilee? A Jubilee year? And it was that when Pentecost happened too? That same year? Did different significant things really happen on Jubilees? Because if not, why are we looking at that as something where we think, oh, that's when the end comes? Because with like Rock Island Books, he has a very interesting thing that he's come up with, where he's thinking that the beginning. I'm gonna use a different color here. Let's go with green and let's thicken the marker up so you can see. I'm going to start writing over this stuff instead of just erasing it. He's saying that in 404 BC is he believes when the fall happened, the fall of mankind, Adam and Eve. Not saying he's wrong. But then he's like, it was 44 Jubilees till... I'm not sure the exact years around. I'm just going to put around this time when Israel started. Israel started here around this time BC. And it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. 44 Jubilees. All right, that's interesting. And then he's like, from there until the end of the millennium would be another 100 Jubilees. And that would bring us to the year 3053 or 4. And then from here is where we get into the conjecture, the speculation, the imagination. Right? Because he's making this sound as if this is gold, right? That what he's found here is showing us that this is the year, right? That 2025 here in the middle here, that this is the year. And I hope he's right. But check this out. He's calculating in the 1,000-year reign of Christ in here. So if you minus 1,000 years from this, let's just use 53 instead of 54. It brings us to 2053. All right? And if you minus 7 years from there, where do you get? You get 2046. Nobody wants to hear that, right? 2046 is when we're going to be raptured, right? I'm not saying this is true. I'm going by the information he's given. But then he says, no. This is where the whole speculation, the big time comes in here. He's saying that Satan's little season at the end, after the 1,000-year reign of Christ, is 21 years. But he has no evidence to prove that's how long it is. All right? How does he know that it's not 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or a month or a week? How does he know how long it is? There's nothing in the scriptures that gives us a time, right? So where does he get this 21 years? He takes it and he says that little season is 21 years. Why? Because when you minus the 21 years from 2046, what do you get? 2025. And that makes it seem as though we can look for the rapture this year. But you have to factor in this. That Satan's little season is 21 years. But there's no reason to believe that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you have nothing to go on to say that that's true. So if he's right about these Jubilees, all we can tell is if he's right about the Jubilee thing, and the Jubilee things looks pretty sound. It seems to line up pretty well from my understanding and going over his videos and the different ones he's been talking about this for a while. There's a lot of sense to it, right? But if we come to this year, we have to take that into consideration and then try to ask God, okay, so how long is Satan's little season? Because as far as we know, it's 10 years. Which means it is 2036. If it's 15 years, then it's 2031. Why assume that it's 21 years just because it fits the year we're in? What, and then next year? This is a perfect setup where he can do this for the next 21 years. Just about, right? Because next year he can say, oh, Satan's little season's actually 20 years. Oh, then 2027 comes. Oh, Satan's little season's actually 19 years. 2028, oh, it's actually 18 years. Right? 18 because of 666. 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. Right? So his little season's 18 years. Right? You can come up with all kinds of stuff. But we need to understand that conjecture and speculation is imagination. It's not real. There could be some truth to it, and it might be actually 100% truth, but we shouldn't act like it is if there's not anything to truly back it up and prove it. Right? So when we're saying Satan's little season is 21 years because of Rock Island Books, prove it to me. Prove to me that his little season is 21 years. Maybe it is, and I'm missing information. I will be happy to accept being wrong and being proved that 21 years is how long Satan's little season is. If you could open the scriptures up to me and show me that, awesome, you proved it. Now I can definitely put some weight to this, that there's something to this, and we need to be paying attention. And then to multiply the numbers of names together, where do you come up with that? Why do you just randomly multiply these numbers? Where I started seeing this from was actually, before Aaron was doing it, was actually a guy, New Moon Rapture. And he just does a lot of these things with these numbers, and he does the same thing, randomly adding the numbers or randomly multiplying them, and he gets to these different numbers and stuff, and it's like, oh, and then if you mirror the number, right? Oh, we got the number 21, and if you mirror it, it's 12. And you just do that with different numbers, and you're like, oh, this shows you that this and that was correct. And it's like, okay, I understand that there's times where you could take these things into consideration. Not so much in biblical stuff, though. You see, you can take something like this into consideration with occult stuff, where you know that these people in their supposed secret societies that are not really so secret anymore, that they communicate through symbols, and a lot of times they will mirror things or put them upside down. Like Aleister Crowley, he talked about using backmasking, where you put messages into the music because you talk backwards, right? And he talked about walking backwards. And that would also mean that you would mirror something, you flip it. So they could talk to somebody if they wanted to give a message about something like 9/11, they could talk about 119 or 11:9 or 119, and people would know, oh, if I mirror it, that's what I get. Or if they flip it upside down, oh, what we're really talking about is 11:6 or 116, right? Maybe they're supposed to do both, and it gives them a certain message about something, right? When they mirror that. But that's not something we see God using. We don't see the scriptures doing things like this. Maybe I'm wrong, and you can show me. I would love for you to show me that, right? But as far as I see, this is something Satan does. taking these numbers and doing certain things with them when it comes to flipping them and mirroring them and doing all these different things, especially going backwards and what have you. So I'm not saying what people are doing by multiplying numbers is satanic, right? Just focusing on the mirroring and the flipping, that's more of how they communicate with one another. So, God's straightforward. He's like, there it is. It's right in front of your face. He doesn't make it where you have to flip it upside down and then put a mirror on it to then get the message. He's not being secretive, right? He's showing it to you. And it's right there. You just got to take the time to look, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to make this video because when the people bringing up their comments, it just got me thinking. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I should say something about this. Because there's a lot of good information that these people have put out. And a lot of times because of that, I overlook the stupid things they say. Like this. And I overlook it because they seem like decent people. And they seem like they're genuine. And they're getting a lot of information out there. But we shouldn't overlook these things. Because like with Rock Island Books example here, 21 years, how do you know that it's that long? You're just kind of guessing, right? You're saying that because it lines up with 2025. And, you added the numbers together, or multiplied Lot and Enoch's number together, and you got 2025. Well, that's nice because you didn't do that a couple years ago, but all of a sudden when it's 2025 and it adds up to 2025, all of a sudden you figured it out. That's convenient, that's cool. But we don't see this, like I said, being done. There's no reason to think that there's any meaning to it. Okay, yeah, it equals 2025. So what? Why do you think that has some kind of significance to when the rapture is going to be? All right? Does that mean we find out the number of Ruth's name and we multiply it with the number of, what's that lady's name? The little Jewish girl who gets married to the Gentile king, and Haman wants to have her and the Jews killed. I forgot her name. But you know who I'm talking about. If we just add the number of her name with the number of Ruth's name or multiply it, all of a sudden we're going to find out the day of Jesus' return or something. I mean, where's your basis to use this as if it's that proves something? It's nothing, right? It's nothing. That's literally what it is. It's nothing. But you're acting like this is something solidified. Like he was using these timetables, the 9 timetables, when no matter how you add it up, you get to like 2025. And it's like, that's interesting. But what makes you think that means that the rapture is 2025? Maybe that it doesn't prove that. Maybe you're just saying, well, that's interesting. Maybe we should look at 2025. Okay, yeah, I could agree with that. But to start making it seem like, this proves it, that doesn't prove it, right? The things that make me look at 2025 are things like the crucifixion. A lot of people believe it was in 32 AD. Let me change the color up here. Let's go with red. Let's end it with some positive stuff here. 32 AD. And that's because you also can see in Stellarium, the Star of Bethlehem was up there in 3 to 2 BC. And if you go from 2 BC all the way to 32 AD, that's actually 33 and a half years. And that makes sense for when the crucifixion happened, when you look at these things, right? And 2,000 years later, the last days would bring us to, you guessed it, 2032. But if you minus the 7 years for 7-year tribulation, that brings us to what year? 2020. 2025. All right. That gets me to look at it. Okay, there's something to that. Something to that, right? And I'll add another witness to it. Years ago when I was saying, hey, these rapture heads need to look at the year. They need to try to find the year instead of looking at the day. You know, why you trying to look for this? Let's say you have a dozen haystacks out in the field and somebody tells you, I threw out a needle in one of the haystacks. What should you do first? Before you just start going through a haystack, because chances are you're going to go through the wrong one, right? Because it's 1 in 12. Chances are you're going to go through the wrong one the first bunch of times, and you're just going to waste your time unless you just happen to get blessed and you find it the first time or within the first 5 or 6 times, right? Because chances are you won't really start to get it until there's like 4 left. Then your chances are starting to get a little better that you might hit it. But then you've already gone through 8 haystacks looking for a needle. And that's a lot of waste of time, right? So what should you do first? Let's try to figure out which haystack it is, right? Let's figure out the year. And then if we can figure out, hey, it was this haystack. This is the one that he went by. And this is the one that he hid it in, right? You figured it out, which haystack. Now, you don't waste your time with the other 11 haystacks. You go through that one haystack. And everybody's going through that one haystack. And since you're all working together on that one haystack, you'll all find it, right? But no, people don't want to do that. So when I was trying to look for the year, what I decided to do was go to Matthew 24, because Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation, which we can calculate using Revelation, that would be sometime in the middle of the tribulation. About 3.5 years in, when the 2 witnesses have been giving their testimony, the Antichrist fella, the beast, the son of perdition, will claim to be God in a temple that has been rebuilt. And then something happens to him. I don't know if God strikes him down. Some kid with a stone hits him in the head. He gets shot or something. He gets assassinated. He raises from the dead and kills the 2 witnesses. Right? And from taking the time of the witnesses' ministry is 3.5 years. By the end of the ministry, you can see, okay, so that happens about halfway through, because it's a 7-year trib, right? Time of Jacob's trouble. Just like in Joseph's time, it was a 7-year famine to bring Israel back to Joseph to reunite with their brother that they betrayed, Joseph being Jesus, right? So, I was looking at that abomination of desolation. That would have to happen in the middle of the tribulation. Okay, so we got a little point there. We don't know when that is. But then Jesus says about the fig tree. He cursed the fig tree, and we know the fig tree represents Israel. And he says, let there be no more fruit on you, and the fig tree withers away. But in Matthew 24, Jesus says, hey, when you see the fig tree come back and it brings forth leaves, talking basically about how Israel is going to be destroyed, because I prophesied it with the withering away of the fig tree. It's going to come back, though. One day it's going to come back. When it does, hey, this is when the end comes. Right? Because when it brings forth its leaves, summer is nigh, right? Where time to bring forth fruit. And that generation, and when we use Moses's depiction of a generation from Psalms, 70 to 80 years, right? Generation 70 years, 80 years if by strength and rebellion, and then we fly away. So if we take the 70 to 80 years being a generation, well then Israel forming in 1948, 70 years brings us to 2018. We're at here at 2025, we're at the 77 years. 77 lines up with a church, right? 7's in the church. But anyway, 80 years would be 2028. But you could push this to the spring of 2029, if you really push it, because they won't turn 81 until the spring of 2029, right? So you could push it a little bit. You can push it. But 2028, they should turn 80 years old. And it says that generation shall not pass until they see it, that abomination of desolation. So at the latest, the abomination of desolation would happen probably in the spring of 2029, right? At the latest. And at the earliest, the spring of 2028. Right? At the earliest. Because that's right around the time they turn 80. Right? So it has to happen right at that time. That's the latest it can happen. Or if they wait till they're 80 and before they're 81, then 2028, 2029, that's the latest it can happen. Right? The earliest being when they turn 80 years old. The latest being right before they turn 81. Right? So you following me? I'm saying it in different ways just to make sure we're on the same page. You're understanding where I'm going with this. So if we look at that, and let's start with the spring of 2029, or, let's go with 2028, because this is where I started, because I always wanted it to be sooner than later, right? So if we go and we start with the spring of 2028, when Israel turns 80 years old, and then we go back 3.5 years, well, you got 2027, 2026, 2025, and then a half a year brings us to the fall of 2024. And if you've been following me before 2024, a couple years before that, I've been saying the earliest the rapture could happen would be 2024, and in the fall of 2024, right? And then I was saying, okay, at the latest, when could it be? Well, if we go to 2029, and it's right before Israel turns 81, so it's around the spring again, we go back 3.5 years, where does that bring us? The fall of 2025. It's just a year ahead, right? And I gave a cushion saying, well, maybe, possibly, we're raptured right there, right before Israel turns, what would it be, 78? Right before they turn 78, then that's when we would go. All right, they just turned 77, so before they turn 78, that would be in the spring of 2026. I'm just kind of adding that in there. There's really no reason to do so. I'm, again, speculating, conjecture, imagination, telling you there's no reason to really do that. But when I started saying it, I was like, at the earliest the rapture could happen would be the fall of 2024, and the latest would be the spring of 2026, but our focus would be the whole entire year of 2025, right? And here we are. So for these two things, I got two witnesses. And I'm sure there's other people giving other witnesses to 2025. And this is why I believe 2025. Not because of this other stuff. This other stuff might get people just to dismiss it because they think it's a bunch of foolishness. What I'm showing you here is actually math that lines up. It's not conjecture, speculation, or just straight up imagination. It's facts, right? Which gets me thinking that maybe some of these people are trying to dishearten people. They're either trying to dishearten people or they're just trying to get more views. They're trying to get more attention. They're trying to get more donations. There's something, right? Because why would they base what they're saying off of things that don't have any actual evidence to prove it, right? They're just using it because it fits. It fits to it being this year, so let's use it. Even though there's no reason to accept it, let's just use it, right? And that's not the way we should go about things. Because then people who are on the outside kind of looking at it they're just going to get straight up discouraged because they're going to look at that and be like, that's not evidence. And a lot of people who are taking the time to think about these things, I don't blame them for walking away from this when they're using this as evidence. It's silly. It's stupid, right? It's showing the whole art of the deal thing, right? Donald Trump had a book about the art of the deal where he's like, you got to make the deal sound good so people believe it, not because it's true, but because they want it to be true. And that's what these people are doing. They're believing these things because they want it to be true, not because it's true and it obviously can be proven true. That's not what's going on, right? But there is stuff that points to this year. And if the tribulation starts at, let's say, the Feast of New Oil, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Hanukkah, well, if it starts around that time, 3.5 years later would bring us to Passover time, the spring, which would be where I would believe in 2028, probably not 2029, but could be. Matter of fact, that actually fits better, 2029, now that I think in 2025, we're not in 2024 anymore. So it can't be 2028, it would have to be in 2029. By that time, that's when the Antichrist would be trying to be like Jesus, right? Going to sit on the Ark of the Covenant, claiming to be God, and then dies and raises again, right? Trying to be like Jesus on Passover, right? So, yeah, I think that lines up pretty well. But this is not a thus saith the Lord. This is not something where I guarantee that it's going to happen by the fall, by the winter of 2025, by Hanukkah or something, or even the spring of 2026. I'm not guaranteeing it. But this is where I would bet it all. If I was a betting man and I was going to bet everything on when it's going to be, it's between now and the spring of 2026. And if it doesn't happen by then, and even probably before 2026, then I have no idea. And I'm not going to pretend I know. I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's going to be 2027, 2028, 2029, or 2030, when the years go by, because I don't know. Looking at the evidence, this is what it looks like. It looks like this year, and I don't see how it can fit any other year. So if it's not now, then I'm just going to go into the boat where it's just imminent, where it can just happen at any time, at any day, because nothing else fits. No other year fits. And I think that's the first thing we should figure out is the year. And all the evidence that we got fits to this year. Right? I know there's some people who would like to say, oh no, he wasn't crucified in 32 AD. It would be 33 AD. Oh, that doesn't line up with Israel being 80 years old at the oldest when the abomination of desolation happened. That would mean that they would be 81 years old. Which, if we go by 80 years being the oldest you can be for the generation, that means that that generation would have passed and a new one has started by the time the abomination of desolation happened, because Israel would be 81 years old. So that all of a sudden everything doesn't fit after this year. So where are we going to go from there? I'm open. I'm kind of saying this just to see if anybody hears this and they got information and some ideas about the years of the rapture taking place, right? I'm just kind of throwing it out there because everything I'm seeing, it's now or just never. I don't want to say never, but it's now or any time is basically imminent. Because I'm generally not a person that believes in the imminence. I believed the 2,000 years had to happen first, and we're at that point. The last days are coming to an end. So yeah, I mean, I can keep saying this over and over and rambling, but I'll spare you and stop here. I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. So if you enjoyed this video, you like my other videos, please take a moment to pray to our Heavenly Father that He keeps all of His children going, all His servants going, and He gives us patience and endurance and strength and the courage to keep on keeping on and trucking through life no matter what comes our way. And He blesses us with His Spirit that we may decrease and He increases, and that He keeps the ministries He's given us stewardship over going, and He even supports us by those ministries and puts a hedge of protection around us all until He comes and gets us. But if need be, He gives us the strength to give it all up for Him, as He's given us 100%, that we would give Him 100%. And just to amen in Jesus' name to that should be just fine. But if you want to do some things to help out, you can like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share the video, share the channel, interact in the comments section. That would be greatly appreciated. I would really appreciate if those little things like that, because it helps reach more people, right? But even if you don't want to do that, if you just take this information, do your own video, do your own articles, talk to people yourself, you get the message out yourself, that works too, right? You don't need me to preach the truth. All that really matters is the truth getting out there, right? And if you want to and you're able to, there's 4 ways in the description info box you can support financially. And if that bothers you, you don't have to support financially. And I know that some people always have something to say about it. And it's just kind of like, why do you act like I'm twisting your arm and forcing you, right? I'm not even guilt-tripping you into it, right? Just saying, hey, if you want to, if you're able to, I would appreciate it if you helped out, right? But it is what it is. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.